1966. A lot of stuff was happening in the world, including America. Miranda rights have been passed by Congress as a law that police had to read to you. Cambodia was attacked for the first time during the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was in full tilt and the ATM was invented. But all this was taking place at the same time Harley-Davidson was unveiling its brand new power plant to replace the aging Panhead. Now, I know what y'all are thinking. I love the Panhead too. I got two of them. But it's true that it had some design flaws, which some of them were improved upon during the years of manufacture. But one of them that the Shovelhead was designed to address is the exhaust ports. Now, the Panhead carried over the exhaust port design of the Knucklehead, which worked great. It was external. It was cast iron though. And they quickly figured out that the aluminum, when the exhaust ports or the exhaust pipe would loosen up, the hot gases would slowly erode the exhaust spigots. Now, that's one of the reasons why it's so sought after for Panhead collectors to find OEM heads that the exhaust ports haven't been welded up or they're not eroded. Another issue, and this was addressed later in around 62, 63, when they, the overheating issues of the heads when they were run really hard, their idea to address this was to go to external oiling lines, which helped. But the Shovelhead design was to improve upon those flaws. Number one, they carried over the external oil lines to improve cooling. And the thing is, the heads that they redesigned from the Panhead, because keep in mind, the Shovelhead essentially is for the most part, is a pan bottom end with new heads on it and new rocker boxes. Now, the rocker box design was so it could improve cooling. The rocker boxes were split so that they could add cooling fans in the center of them. If you'll notice that the rocker boxes in the center of them are elevated above the head and has cooling fans under there so air can travel across that. Plus the rear part has, the front part underneath the rocker box has added fans on top of that. Now, the exhaust port was fixed and it became an internal port where it was bolted, the pipe was bolted on by a stud, which they actually improved on even more, or I could say perfected, in the Evo years, which they've carried it on until now with the dual studs. Now, why does the Harley-Davidson Shovelhead get such a bad rap? Well, I tell you what, let's dive into that and figure out exactly if there's a lot of myth to it, misinformation. I know if you get on the internet, and even if you go to, say, Wikipedia, you sit there and see that their information on the Shovelhead is kind of skewed. And I can tell you I know this for a fact because I grew up through those years. First Harley-Davidsons I was around with Panheads and Shovelheads. And, I didn't own them, but the older guys that I knew, my dad's friends and stuff like that, that's what they rode. They were brand new bikes back then. Now, as you see in this article on Wikipedia, plus other articles, is that they're saying that the Shovelhead suffered overheating issues. Well, I'm going to have to say no on that. I've owned several shovels. I've got 5 of them now. I ride them all the time. I've never really had any overheating issues with them. And so you got to keep in mind, the heads were redesigned Panhead heads that specifically were to prevent overheating issues. Now, another thing that you see is they're talking about, and this goes back to the overheating issues, that the cylinders had 10 fins. Well, they did up until the 80 cubic inch, but yeah, they had 10 fins. Well, that was the same number of fins that was on the Panhead. Like I said, the Panhead, well, the Shovelhead is essentially a Panhead bottom end that evolved through the years with new heads put on it. Now, this is something else that really doesn't make any sense. Me being a kid during the 70s, I don't remember this being the case. And if y'all grew up in the 70s, or if you lived through the 70s, let me know in the comments below if this piece of information makes any sense whatsoever to you. Now, you'll see in here, and it's in several articles, that they state that the Shovelhead suffered from detonation issues or pre-ignition issues because of the oil embargo that was going on at that time, plus the EPA removing lead from fuels, that the octane rating was too low for that compression ratio, which is 8-to-1. That's what the Shovelhead came out with. Panhead 7.5-to-1 on the FLH models and whatnot, or all of them that were the high compression ratios. But they went to 8-to-1, and I mean, 8-to-1 will run on just about anything that will burn. And as you see in this article right here, that's exactly what Jim Chambers said when he wrote it 8 years after the Panhead, well, after the Evo was invented, and after the Panhead quit being in production. Excuse me, Shovelhead. Now, but the thing about it is, they had 87 octane back then. I remember that they had regular, you had super, you had premium, then you had super premium. I mean, super premium was 101 octane. And y'all let me know in the comments if y'all remember that, because I know I do. If you see in this picture right here, I think that's 93 octane, and this picture was taken in the mid-70s. Now, I realize that the oil embargo was causing the prices to go high and skyrocket, but my thing on these articles that are written by people who probably didn't even live through all that, it probably makes sense to them, but we had plenty of different octane ratings that we could choose from. At the same time, ethanol had been used to raise octane in fuel ever since the 20s. So they were already working on, when they were removing lead from the fuel, which it was in there for several reasons, and one was increased octane. But they were already working on adding, they called it gasohol, which was, ethanol that was in the fuel. Now, so as far as detonation issues and it not being reliable because of that, I'm gonna have to call bullshit on that. I've got a 79 Firebird formula with a 403 in it, and if you do any research, or you probably know that it had an 8-to-1 compression ratio. All through the 70s, the EPA was choking lots of performance stuff down, and one of the ways they were able to do that was to meet EPA was to lower compression ratios. So as far as this whole octane thing and causing detonation, if you were not getting the correct gas, that had the right octane, and you didn't choose to go to say 80 or 89, 93, 101, whatever was available in super premium or premium, well, that's kind of on the operator of the motorcycle fault. It's not necessarily on the design, but I'm pretty sure 87 was available, or maybe 84, 86, something like that at the time. Now, so, you've got Wikipedia and other articles mentioning detonation. You've got the issue saying that it overheated. Now, another thing that they mention is pooling in the rocker boxes, oil pooling in the rocker boxes, which would then migrate down the valve guides, exhaust valve guide to be specific, and cause smoking. Now, obviously back then, until they started putting seals on there, and the Panhead didn't have seals from the factory either, the clearances were a little bit looser because of the the amount of heat and expansion, thermal expansion and whatnot. So yeah, some of the oil may have gotten into it, but none of the ones I've had 12 Shovelheads through the years. And like I said, I've got 5 of them still right now, and I ride that 78.5 lowrider all the time, and I don't have no smoking issues. Now, as you see in this Wikipedia article, and I like Wikipedia, but keep in mind it's still written by people like us, we add the information and it's fact checked. And sometimes information is lost to antiquity when it gets on up in the years. Y'all remember that old, what they call it when we was kids? They called it the telephone game. You tell a story to one guy and they whisper it in the ear, and by the time it makes it all the way around, it's kind of skewed. Now, they're saying in there that the Harley-Davidson Shovelhead used or had excessive oil consumption, and that you would have to put a quart in there about every 500 miles. Now, yes, the Shovelhead and the early engines did use more oil, but some of that had to do with the fact that it had, the oil pump had an oiler that went to the primary chain. You had a breather system that went to the rear drive chain, and it just wasn't. It wasn't 2024 technology at the time. Now, but I can tell you from my experience, and you guys let me know if you've owned a Shovelhead, how often you have to top it off with a quart of oil, how many miles. Myself, I don't know. That's, once again, some bullshit. What you had going on that really detracted and created this stigma of I've seen some YouTube videos say the dark days of Harley-Davidson, it didn't have anything to do with the power plant. You had a lot of stuff going on in the nation and the world at that time. We were full tilt into the Vietnam War. And then in the mid-70s, when it finally stopped, you had a lot of people coming back from overseas that needed jobs, were struggling financially. We were hit with 2 recessions. We had the oil embargo, which increased fuel prices. And obviously, okay, let's touch on the AMF years. Now, when Harley-Davidson made the decision to merge with AMF, the main reason was because Honda was flooding the market with cheaper, probably better performance-oriented models. At the time. But there was a reason for that. I don't know if a lot of people remember, but at the end of World War II, one of the things that the U.S. did and agreed to do with Japan was supply funding to help get their economy back up and growing. Now, part of that funding went to getting their plants rebuilt, or new ones built, with new technology as far as the manufacturing machinery. We released a lot of technology to them, knowledge-wise, and so these plants were able to get up and going and hit the ground running. And so Honda was able to create this machine on its new state-of-the-art machinery and flood the U.S. market. Essentially the CB put the British motorcycle industry out of business. Harley-Davidson, at the time they were thinking about merging with AMF, they were still using, granted, it was machines inside their plant that had been upgraded, but there's only so many upgrades you can do to something before you need new stuff that's built on new technology. They were still using antiquated machinery that was slowing production and increasing the cost. And they knew that AMF could bring in some capital, and they did. AMF brought in some money. They spent a lot of money on updating their machinery, which helped Harley-Davidson out. But at the same time, you had like this perfect storm brewing. Once again, it didn't have nothing to do with the design of the Shovelhead or the design of the bikes back then, as much as it had to do with all these variables that come into play. Number one, anytime there's a merger, you're going to have the employees who have been there for most of their life that are going to be a bit disgruntled by all the new changes that are being brought in by this new entity that essentially owns part of the company. They've got the right to implement changes. They're going to, fund new stuff, then they got that right. And so that upset a lot of the employees, which if you look at other companies that have merged, they have teething issues until everything gets smoothed out. Now, Harley-Davidson even went through a strike at that time frame. I think it lasted like 8 months or something close to that. All right, so they're striking, and you've got the company bringing in people to help fill the spots that aren't quite as qualified, and so your quality control is going to go down. Even once the strike was over with, and prior to the strike, quality control was affected because you had so many employees who were just upset and just didn't give a shit. You know, we've all been there. If you ever worked, you know, 9-to-5 job, you can get irritated by what, you know, what's going on wherever you're working. Now, so you had all this stuff going on, and quality control was going downhill. This is true, you know. You know, it's not that the design was flawed. And with quality control going downhill, you had the reputation just, you know, tanking. I mean, it was going down like a Led Zeppelin. Now, you also had some other variables that come into play, which affected leaks and stuff. You know, you had machining tolerances that weren't up to par, affecting quality control. They were getting castings that were brought in for covers and stuff, primary covers. I've got several of them that were way too porous. They should have never made it through, or they should have never made it on a bike. I mean, true fact. But as Harley-Davidson started realizing that, you know, the ship was sinking, that's when, yes, we all know, that's when they really started putting in a lot of effort into trying to make the buyback and put the new Evo engine out there. But that doesn't mean that the Panhead was good, the Knucklehead was good. These are iconic engines. The Evo is iconic, but somehow the Shovelhead, you know, was a piece of crap. But I mean, let me know in the comments if you had a Shovelhead and you thought it was a piece of crap and you were just so happy to get something different, something newer, or you went and bought a Honda, you know, if that made you happy, that's good. Y'all let me know. I myself, I love my Shovelheads. I know, I'll tell you something else, you're starting to get a resurgence of popularity of Shovelheads. And the reason I believe behind that is it's essentially the last of the iron barrel engines. All right, it's the last one right now in this time that you could look at as a vintage bike. You know, the technology was still somewhat, you know, antique. You're still running points on most of them until the later years. I mean, it like I said, it had a cast iron cylinder. It wasn't until the 80s when the Evo came out that really the engine started becoming more what you would call technologically advanced. Now, and so if you got people, you got younger generations, they're getting into the vintage motorcycle scene. The Shovelhead fits that need in a price range that they can afford. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and tell you they can pick them up for 50 cents, but at the same time, a lot of these guys, they can't buy Panheads. They sure can't buy Knuckleheads or ULs or WLs or any of the other Ls out there, you know, F-heads and whatnot. I mean, it's not in their budget. But if they want to make a cool chopper that's kind of throwback to that time period, the Shovelhead really meets that needs. Now, like I said, you know, from the years that I had them, I mean, I got them now, what I'm saying, in years ago. I mean, I started out, my very first big twin, I built from a basket case. It was a 76 FXE Shovelhead. I didn't have no problem. Of course, I did rebuild it myself from the ground up. So anything that I thought wasn't right, I went ahead and fixed it before I put it together. Now, like I said, to me, the Shovelhead has a special place in my heart. I know there's people out there, especially guys a little bit older than me, that hate it. I know those years created a blemish on Harley-Davidson's reputation, which still to this day, I bump into people who I tell them that I ride Harleys and stuff, and you know, they tell me about how Harleys mark their territory, and I can't remember all the other ones, the sayings they have for them, but if y'all remember, let me know, you know, the hate sayings, let me know in the comments. But anyhow, these are my thoughts from my experience with Shovelheads. I'm going to end it here. I'll see y'all in the next one.